Hi everybody. I'm just want to do a really quick update since the last video. In a previous video I talked about reaching out to a couple Facebook friends and trying to communicate with them and see if I can get any information about Daniel. I did reach out to two of them. One of them responded, the other one didn't. And the person who responded, will refer to her as Mrs. B. She knew of Daniel during the 1990s. So we're getting a little bit closer and a little bit more information is now starting to trickle in. But I'm not too happy about the information that I'm hearing because it just really doesn't sound good at all. It sounds like Dan is in a really dark place and it doesn't sound like anybody's there for him. One of my concerns is Janice, his mother, was kind of running the whole show. And so I'd have to say, what happened to Dan after she passed away? She passed away, I think, in 2016 sometime. So what happened to him? Who's taking care of him? Who's watching out for him? Is anybody watching out for him? According to Mrs. B, during the 1990s, when she first met the family, she knew the family probably about 3 years before she even discovered that they had this brother out there. So that means he wasn't, and I guess it depends on what her activity was and how close she was to their family. But Dan was not somebody they talked about. She did tell me that she went to visit Dan with, I guess, Dennis and Dennis's wife Tammy. On occasion she would bring things out to Dan, and she describes never knowing what she's walking into is how she puts it. She's on some days you walked in and Dan was having a good day. He was orientated to his time and place. Other days Dan couldn't tell you who he was. He didn't even know what his name was. He didn't know where he was at. And then again, on other occasions, he would be really hostile and angry and tell people not to talk because he was suspicious that there were ears inside all the walls listening to all the conversations. When I hear stuff like that, I get really concerned that we've gone beyond bipolar disorder and now we're into full-blown schizophrenia. Which can be managed. These illnesses can be managed, but it takes so much important elements to manage it. It takes a solid support system. Family's got to be there. And I know that dealing with mental illness can be a very difficult thing, but if you don't have the support of your family and you don't have a good support system, then your treatment is not going to be successful at all. Nutrition is going to play a big part. What kind of meals is Dan eating? I ask Mrs. B, it's like, is he living by himself? Is he living in a group home environment? What do you know there? And according to Mrs. B, Dan rented or lived in an apartment by himself. I'm sure he didn't rent it because that would have showed up in search results, right? But that didn't. And he wasn't able to go to work because he had so much medications going on. She told me that Janice, Dan's mother, was getting paid while he was doing clinical drug testing. She described it as selling him off to the government for drug testing, but those could have been Daniel's words. I'm not sure exactly where she heard that, but my interpretation of that is he was probably involved in clinical drug testing. And so, in the 1990s, that was the last time she heard of him or saw of him. She did report going to a Christmas party at one time where the whole family was there. Janice, all the siblings, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, everybody was there except for Dan. There was no signs of Dan and nobody talked about Dan. So that is painting the picture to me that Dan really doesn't have a support system at all. He was living in alone in an apartment. And if he had days where he didn't even know his own name, why was this happening? Why was he living alone? So yes, I find that really upsetting. I find that pretty disturbing. I will post the entire transcript on the blog if you want to read all the messages that Mrs. B had to say. She describes Dennis as being a heavy drinker. His personality had changed. He became a real heavy drinker, got into a car accident where his best friend died in that accident. She describes Daniel's younger sister, Marianne, as also having a drinking problem, would get into fist fights with her boyfriends, and she described it as two men fighting, where apparently Marianne had teeth knocked out, had broken noses, black eyes, and she says the cops were constantly intercepting. So it doesn't sound like, if Dan's going to be successful in treatment at all, you really need a healthy environment. If the family continues to be as dysfunctional as it was back in the 70s, then Dan's doesn't have much of a chance. I made a commitment to Dan in the 70s to take care of him. Of course, he was free to come and go as he wanted, but you know what? That commitment still stands. If Dan wants to come back, depending on what kind of shape he's in, if he's even going to remember me, by the sounds of it, that's a possibility. He won't even remember me. But whatever shape he's in, I would like to give it a shot. I'd like to help him. Let's clean him up, regulate his medications, and bring him back to the East Coast. I would be willing to do that. I will not stop until I get all this information, until I learn the truth about what's going on with Dan. I will continue to reach out to members of the family and other Facebook friends and see what anybody knows, but I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going to create my own version of Amber Alert video, and I will boost them on and pay. I'll do a pay marketing campaign, have them go spread out in Edmonds, Everett, and Linwood. I'll see what I can do to find Dan and get some solid information, and hopefully we can help this guy. Let's make the rest of his life comfortable. There's no reason that Dan should be living alone and in such horrible conditions. Okay, until the next update. Thanks.